One season, two completely different battles. On one side, a Premier League title race that had Villa within 3 points of the top. On the other, a European campaign that kept climbing week after week, all the way to a final in Istanbul. Most clubs pick one. Most clubs have to. Aston Villa tried to do both. And what happened next is one of the most remarkable stories of the 2025-26 season. Think about where Villa were just 3.5 years ago, hovering above the relegation zone, in the middle of a managerial change. A club with no clear direction. And then Istanbul, a trophy, 30 years in the making. This is how it happened. To understand what this season meant, you have to go back to October 2022. Villa were bottom of the table. The manager had just been changed. It wasn't exactly an easy time to be an Aston Villa fan. Then Unai Emery walked through the door. A manager who had already won the Europa League 4 times with 3 different clubs. First season, 7th place, back in Europe for the first time since 2010. Second season, 4th place, Champions League football for the first time in 41 years. Third season, Champions League group stage. Looking at the table, one thing was clear. This club was moving upward, and it had no intention of stopping. But a trophy, an actual trophy, had been missing since the 1996 League Cup. That number, 30 years, was there all season long, unspoken, but never forgotten. Villa entered the Europa League after finishing 6th in the Premier League. 1 point away from Champions League qualification. In a way, this is a story that started with a setback, but that's not how it ended. In the league phase, they won 7 of 8 matches. This was no accident. There was intent from the very beginning. Feyenoord, Fenerbahce, and Bologna along the way, finishing 2nd in the overall standings. Round of 16, Lille, 3-0 on aggregate. Quarterfinals, Bologna again, 7-1 on aggregate. Then the semi-final, an all-English tie against Nottingham Forest. The first leg didn't go as planned. Then Villa Park took over, and that night changed everything. 4-0 on the night, 4-1 on aggregate. And in Istanbul on May 20th against Freiburg, Tielemans Buendia Rogers, 3-0, 30 years. And their first European title since beating Bayern Munich in 1982, since that legendary team. To understand what this final really meant, you have to understand who was standing in the dugout. Emery won this trophy with Villa, but for him this was no ordinary trophy. It was his 5th. Sevilla 2014, 2015, 2016, 3 consecutive titles with Sevilla. That era opened a separate page in Europa League history. Then Villarreal in 2021, beating Manchester United on penalties in one of the most dramatic finals the competition has ever seen. And now Villa, Sevilla, Villarreal, Villa. Different countries, different squads, different budgets, but always the same result. There's a reason people call him the Europa League's specialist, because no manager in history has won it more. In Istanbul, standing alongside Villa was the most experienced name this tournament has ever seen, and that made a difference. While all of this was happening in Europe, Villa were fighting a completely different battle on weekends. In December 2025, looking at the table, you didn't need much imagination to put Villa at the top. 3 points, just 3 points behind Arsenal. A club that hadn't won a league title since 1981, and this was genuinely a big moment. On an 11-game winning run, really in the title conversation. Then came the Arsenal match on December 30th, a 4-1 defeat at the Emirates that opened the gap back up. From that point, the title race slowly moved away from them. By the end of the season, Arsenal were champions with 85 points. Villa finished 4th with 65, a 20-point gap. League and Europe at the same time. It sounds simple, but those living through it know just how heavy that weight really is. In the end, the points told the whole story. In football, they always do. Managing 2 tournaments is a matter of strategy on paper. On the pitch, it's something else entirely. Villa played over 50 matches this season. Thursday, Europa League, Sunday, Premier League. That cycle continued for weeks. 60 hours of recovery, then back again. The weight showed at times. In February, Villa dropped points in 4 of 6 league matches. But when the semi-final week arrived, Emery made his choice and committed to it. Europe came first. A weakened side went out in the league. Some results suffered, but the calculation proved right. Many clubs wear themselves down on 2 fronts and end up losing both. Villa didn't. That in itself is a separate achievement. Here's what makes this season genuinely remarkable. Think about it. Most big clubs in Europe can't even advance this far on 2 fronts at the same time. Villa were running 2 campaigns simultaneously, and in both, they were genuinely competitive until the very end. Emery made the call to prioritize Europe in the semi-final week, fielding a weakened side in the league. Managers who see the bigger picture are rare. Emery that night was exactly that. And then there's the wider picture. Think back to that club sitting near the relegation zone 3.5 years ago, and look at where they are now. A European trophy, back-to-back Champions League campaigns, and a squad that finished 4th in one of the most competitive leagues in the world. The 1982 European Cup winners had their names in Villa folklore. On May 20th in Istanbul, a new group wrote their own chapter. This doesn't happen often, and when it does, it's worth paying attention to. Istanbul is done. The question is different now. Where does Villa go from here? They have a European trophy. They're back in the Champions League for the 2nd time in 3 seasons. They have a manager under contract until 2029 who has now won the Europa League 5 times. This is no accident. The foundations are real. The direction is set. But the next question is already forming. Can they take the final step? Can they genuinely challenge for a league title? Can they go deeper in the Champions League? Maybe the title didn't come. Maybe they couldn't go further in the Champions League. But that Villa belong here now is no longer up for debate. 3.5 years, 1 manager, 1 clear direction, and now 1 trophy on the shelf that wasn't there before. Nobody knows what next season will bring, but it's definitely worth watching.